The Democratic Alliance has been governing the Western Cape, as we know, for the past 15 years. Party leader John Steenhuisen recently called those contesting elections in the province mercenary parties. Several promises have been made, not only in the Western Cape, but by various political parties in various parts of the country. Let's dissect some of the DA's promises in the Western Cape and some of what it calls its successors. Keegan Leech is a researcher at Africa Check, and he joined us live this afternoon. Keegan, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. And you obviously have your hands full at Africa Check. It's that time of not the year, what is it? That time of the 5 years on.
It's election season again.
Indeed, thank you for that. You've got your hands full. There are lots of promises being made, election manifestos, and it's difficult sometimes for the average person to really sift through those promises, right? But that's the job that Africa Check is now besieged with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we have been doing that all year, and we, when we can, try to look at what parties have said about where they've governed. So obviously the ANC and the DA also governs, most importantly, in the Western Cape.
So let's hone in on the Western Cape, as you have done at Africa Check. Now, when you go through the promises that a party makes, in this instance, the DA in the Western Cape, what are the categories when you're looking at it at Africa Check to check the validity and the truthfulness of the of that promise? What are the categories that you use to test that?
So we have a range of categories. It ranges from something like correct, which is a claim that's just unambiguously true and accurate as best the information we have, to incorrect, which would be the opposite. But there's a lot of shades in between. Like a claim can be unproven, where the available evidence we have doesn't say either way whether it's accurate or not. It's not enough to disprove a claim or prove it entirely. And those shades of meaning can be quite important sometimes.
And I imagine that unproven category can be quite useful for manifestos, right? Because we're not outright lying. We're not saying something that is outright untrue, but it's not entirely true.
Absolutely. And it's always good to get a feel of whether the political parties you're considering voting for are in touch with the best available information and whether they are presenting it accurately, even if sometimes that best available information doesn't lead us to a firm conclusion.
So let's take a look at some of the claims John Steenhuisen has made on the DA's track record in the Western Cape. And your verdict on this claim has been incorrect. So this is, there's no evidence to back up what is being said here. And the claim is that where the DA governs in the Western Cape, 8 out of 10 people have a job. But what did you find?
Well, like you say, that's incorrect. It's not just that there isn't evidence to support it. This is actually contradicted by the information that we do have. The Western Cape's unemployment rate is about 20%, or 2 in 10, but that doesn't mean that the remaining 8 in 10 people all have a job. Even if we just use the expanded unemployment rate, which includes people who aren't employed but have been discouraged from seeking work, maybe because they can't find work or there's none available in their area, then the unemployment rate rises slightly higher to, I think, around 40%. And if we look at something called the absorption rate, which is the actual percentage of all people of working age who have employment, that's only around 40%, which implies only around 4 in 10 people have a job.
That's very interesting. In terms of drinking water, that's a topic that is at the top of all of our minds recently, right? We're talking about water shortages in Johannesburg, water tankers being used in parts of KZN and many other parts of the country as well. In the Western Cape, also during the manifesto launch, John Steenhuisen said in Cape Town, the DA provides the cleanest drinking water there. So what Africa Check has done, it's not only talking about access to water. You didn't just look into access to piped water, but you also looked into the quality of that water. What did you find?
Yes. A quick correction. I just checked my notes. The absorption rate in the Western Cape is around 54%.
54%.
Apologies for the... but in terms of water, we looked at water quality, and the water in Cape Town is quite clean. It does get a relatively good rating, lots of excellence in several of the categories that are considered by the rating system, we were told, is one of the most reliable. It's the South African, I think it's the National Integrated Water Information Systems rating category, but it's not the best in the country. And the best in the country isn't from a DA-governed metro. In fact, the city of Johannesburg, which is governed by the ANC, was also very good and even got one more excellent rating than the city of Cape Town did. So John Steenhuisen's close, but he's incorrect to say that the city of Cape Town has the best water, the cleanest.
Well, it's also the term he uses when he talks about sanitation services. And he says the Western Cape has the best, again, in the country.
Yeah, and this is one where we get into those shades of grey. We rated this unproven, essentially because there are lots of different ways to look at sanitation, and there isn't a single way to rank it. So when you're talking about sort of improvements in sanitation, there are other provinces that have seen much greater improvements in recent years in providing sanitation to everyone in the province than the Western Cape has. And depending on what surveys we look at, we find slightly different rankings for which provinces or which metros come out on top for providing the highest proportion of people living there with access to sanitation.
So Keegan, this is incredibly interesting, incredibly helpful. Is there a way for our viewers to go on to Africa Check and have a look at some of the other research and some of the other promises that have been tested by Africa Check from other political parties?
Absolutely. If you just look up our website, africacheck.org, you will find our most recent articles are mostly covering the election. And we have an election hub. If you look up our Africa Check election hub, then you will find all of the coverage that we've done of the election.
Yeah.
And you'll find we've covered other political parties, and we've covered a lot more promises than we've got time to deal with here. So if there is a particular issue that you're concerned about, or a particular party whose claims you would like assessed, then you can go have a look there and see if we've gotten to that.
Yeah, an incredibly useful tool in an election that I think is going to be marred by a bit of confusion for the average voter insofar as who we're going to put that X next to. Keegan, let me thank you for your time. Keegan Leech is a researcher at Africa Check, in this instance going through some of the opposition parties' claims on governance. That's the DA and the work that it's done in the Western Cape. But head on over to africacheck.org. They've got a very interesting election hub there. And if you want to check out a particular party around promises they've made on a particular issue, you can get some clarity there.